Go,
Okay.
go. Oh, actually, we did just go live. I'm sorry.
No,
I don't want
no,
to cut
that's
you
good.
off.
That's good.
But I want to hear what you were going to say after the
Yeah,
show.
we'll talk after. Yeah, yeah.
That was wonderful. It was almost a disaster, but instead it creates great suspense, at least for me. As you know, we'll count up here, give Cecil something to chop, and we'll start the real show. Now, the 49ers aren't really going to take Mac Jones, are they? That more this
Yeah.
week on the
What?
couch. Dane Brugler, a definitive voice. So glad to have you back now that the beast is done. Are the 49ers going to take Mac Jones?
Why not? I mean, he's pretty good. Seriously though, if you're gonna look at the most important traits you want in a quarterback, accuracy, decision making, right? One,
Yeah.
two. You could argue Mac Jones
Sure.
is better than Justin Fields, Trey Lance in those two areas. I think you just have to figure out, okay, is he good enough in those other areas? Mobility, arm strength, all these other variables that it takes to play the position. So I don't think it's completely crazy because, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, especially with quarterbacks. Now, do I agree with it? No. I would personally, when that trade went down, the first name that came to my mind was Trey Lance. Oh, perfect. I love the fit. I love it just makes too much sense. Trey Lance is such a unique prospect when you factor in the physical traits, the intelligence, the meager experience, but yet, he is such a sharp guy that I think that it's a natural fit there. The 49ers moved up with a specific quarterback in mind. Now, has anything happened these last 3 weeks to change their opinion? That's what we don't know. Kyle Shanahan and co, they've been going to, they were in Tuscaloosa to see Mac Jones, Columbus to see Justin Fields, and then headed to Fargo this week to see Trey Lance live, these second pro days. Without the 30 visits, without the personal workouts, individual workouts, it really makes it intriguing. Scouts haven't been on campus in the fall, so their teams are still figuring things out about these players, especially these quarterbacks. So, did anything happen these last 3 weeks to change that initial target where the 49ers moved up? That's something we're kind of waiting on pins and needles to find out.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's really exciting. I think it's the best cliffhanger we've had. Honestly, I can't remember another cliffhanger like it. And the reason I seem somewhat obsessed about it right now, Dane, to be honest, and Jeff Risdon. Jeff does fantastic work. I always like anything. And what I like especially about Jeff is that, like myself, he's not afraid to just speak in his own voice, and just say, this is what I think. Sure. And he said in his 10 thoughts 10 days before the draft that he just put out, I still refuse to believe that some allegedly smart and savvy football people like 49ers GM John Lynch and head coach Kyle Shanahan wouldn't see that Jones is not close to Justin Fields as a passer, as an athlete, or as an overall prospect. Or you just put Trey Lance in. Honestly, it's interchangeable, Lance and Fields. Yeah. And that's kind of my camp, in that there's something that I will be offended, but yet want to hate watch how Mac Jones' career goes versus Lance and Fields. If Kyle Shanahan, it's the trading the 2 first-round picks plus. I mean, it's really saying this. I have this much clarity, but like you said, and it's been interesting watching the betting markets, right, Dane? I don't know how much you pay attention to that, or how much you see it as another facet or angle to understanding at least the prediction or projection of the draft. But the betting markets are flip-flopping around now. That it's going from Jones to Fields, and now we'll see if it goes to Lance, which kind of reflects, I almost posit, like you're saying, maybe they really don't know. I mean, maybe they're in the process of making the decision right now, and that's fascinating. Either way, it's an amazing specimen of a personality test of Lance and Lynch. Of Shanahan and Lynch. Now, then we go to number 4, okay? Atlanta, and there's so many directions here, and again, sort of the lying season, or whatever you want to call it, playing out in the media. Fontenot and Arthur Smith have different ideas about Matt Ryan and a quarterback at number 4, and then it's been resolved apparently. So where is this going to resolve? Pitts, trade down, take a quarterback?
Well, you said there's a lot of different ways. Really, there's only 3, right? There's You take a quarterback, you trade back, or you take Pitts. I think those are the 3 options, and you can make a case for any of those 3. Really, right. I mean, it's really a good problem to have if you're Atlanta. I I do think that me personally, I'm taking the quarterback. I'm not, especially if it's Trey Lance at that point. I think that just with that Arthur Smith offense, that would just be a ton of fun to watch. You have your long-term succession plan in place. You just don't pass on good quarterbacks. That'd be my. At the end of the day, that's just what you can hang your hat on, especially when, let's just say, okay, fast forward, we're in week 12 of the 2021 season. Wherever Trey Lance ends up, he's had a few starts, playing pretty well, showing that promise. Matt Ryan's struggling in Atlanta, and Atlanta's they're under 500. All of a sudden, it looks like, oh, shoot, we should have taken quarterback.
Right.
We should have. And so that's a possibility. Trading back would be awfully appealing as well if they're able to get something similar to what the Dolphins got to move back from the 49ers. That's something that can set you up for the future, where you don't have to go quarterback now, but you're set up for future years if you want to go get a quarterback. And then there's the Kyle Pitts argument, which he's just a different cat. He's special, and I don't want to be the guy that passes on special. And that's what Kyle Pitts offers you. So it reminds me a lot of Quentin Nelson, in 2018, where it's like, okay, yeah, Quentin Nelson's a really good player, but then after you get over those mental hurdles of having a guard as your top player, it's like, okay, yeah, he is the top player this year. And it's the same thing with Kyle Pitts. Once you get past those mental hurdles that you can't have a tight end as your top non-quarterback in the draft, you realize, yeah, he is the best non-quarterback in this draft. And what he would add to that offense would certainly, just from a, football enjoyment viewing perspective, I'd love to see it. It'd be fun to add him into that offense, selfishly. So, but Atlanta's in an enviable spot because they've got three really intriguing options where I don't know that there's necessarily a wrong move there.
Yes, we can say the same thing about the Bengals. And then when you say that to Bengals fans, they go, no, please don't say that. Please don't say we can't mess it up.
Right.
But you're right. You can peel the layers here, right? So let's start with the first layer, Dane, whether it's Trey Lance or Justin Fields. And I mean, I could ask you, because you have to make a choice. I mean, was it close, Lance and Fields, or do you think there's this real separation between Lance and Fields and just their overall value as a prospect?
They were like 7 and 8 on my overall board. So, I mean, it's close.
It's close.
It's fun. It's funny because I went back, I looked at my first board in August, and they were 6 and 7, Lance and Fields. So, in my opinion, really hadn't changed that much. And I think it really just comes down to Fields just being a little more methodical than I want to see. I just want to see a little more urgency, a little more, and that's not a reason to not draft him in the top 10. That's just if you have to, nitpick these guys to rank them. That's really what it just would come down for me personally. But I certainly get why he's number 2 or number 3. Right. For other people, just the talent is fantastic. So it's going to be fascinating on draft weekend, though. Okay, let's play it out here. Let's say Jones goes 3, just hypothetically speaking.
And let me interject. If Jones goes 3, someone said 1,000 phone calls will be made. Like if Jones goes 3, I think the destiny of 4 or 5 franchises changes instantly, and probably 20 or 25 first-round picks change. I mean, if Jones goes 3, the entire complexion of the first round changes. True? I mean, are the war rooms around the league? Are war rooms around the league? This is just a tangent, and I want to let you get back to what you were going to do with the scenario.
Go.
But are war rooms around the league preparing for Jones to go 3? Or are they preparing for Fields and Lance to go 3? Because I feel like the first round goes very differently depending on what you project there, and you have to kind of pick a lane. But I'm just curious what you think about this.
Yeah, and that's kind of that's the big question mark right now. And that's what teams are going through is, okay, if Jones goes 3, what does that mean for Lance and Fields? Like, how does that play out? And then if Lance or Fields goes 3, how does that play out? Where does Mac Jones go in that scenario? Yeah, it's something that's teams are trying to figure that out. And I don't know that anyone that I've talked to has a great answer. If Mac Jones doesn't go 3, does he fall to 15 in the Patriots? If Fields doesn't go 3 or 4, how quickly does he get snatched up? That's kind of tough to figure out. I think there are some in the league that think the Panthers could absolutely go quarterback again. Just the theory of throw as many darts as you can at the quarterback board and let it, play out as it will. okay, let's just say he doesn't go. The Bengals, I think they're set at 5. I think that they're not going to trade out of there. Maybe we'll be surprised and they will. I think they're ready to take Jamar Chase there. 6, the Dolphins. I think they traded back up to get that pass rusher, or not pass rusher, pass catcher. Whether that's Kyle Pitts or Jalen Waddle at number 6. And then 7 at the Lions. Are they prepared to go quarterback here? Are they, we know they're in a long-term rebuild now. Are they ready to accelerate that a little bit with the quarterback? Or are they going to go, let's go Penei Sewell, let's build up the line, let's go, or is that the trade down spot? Is that where the trade up spot for a team like the Patriots, a team like Washington? Could Chicago make a big move and try to get up to 7 with Detroit? Try to get in front of Carolina, in front of Denver. Yeah, I mean that's the intriguing part. I mean, who loves Fields enough to make that move? It's hard to figure that out at this point. But that's what and then what if, okay, let's just say, for hypothetical speaking, Atlanta, say they don't get the deal that they want,
right?
At 4, no, they get some okay deals, but nothing that blows their socks off. They're not ready to take a quarterback. They want to win right now with Matt Ryan as their starter. So they take Kyle Pitts. Okay, now we've got 2 quarterbacks with Trey Lance and Justin Fields, where it gets really interesting about, okay, 7 being that sweet spot for a trade down. What does Denver do at 9? Are they ready to take one of these guys? The intrigue is going to be so much fun to watch play out live during that first round, the first 12 picks.
Yeah, and it's going to cause a ripple effect. Yeah, everything that happens is going to ripple through the first round. And I think that psychologically, when you saw Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch trade up to 3, it felt like, well, that has to be somebody that you're really willing to marry your future to. And that's one of the things that's very different about taking a quarterback in the first round versus taking another position. Because when you're taking a quarterback in the first round, Dane, like you're really taking like a 10 to 15 year view of the franchise, right? I mean, you don't take a quarterback in the first round for him to be your quarterback for 5 or 6 years. You take a quarterback in the first round for him to be your quarterback until he retires, right? So this affects, in the entire direction of the Atlanta franchise, the entire direction of the franchise. If you take Kyle Pitts, you're saying we are pushing all of our assets forward to be as competitive as we can be right now. And if you trade down and take Patrick Surtain or something like that, then you say, well, we're going to stay competitive, but we're still open to our future being turning on a dime. Like next year we trade Matt Ryan. Right. And if you take a quarterback, you're saying we're married to this quarterback. And I think the whole question hinges on, and it's one of the things you do, year after year, Dane, we watch these players, and I made the joke to Matt Waldman that's like, we're like fortune teller OBGYNs. Like we're looking at like the ultrasound of a player's development, and we're projecting what they're going to be as an adult. Like we're looking at the fetus and we're saying, well, because it's as Matt Waldman has pointed out, it's just a big leap. I think we underestimate the leap from college to pro football. We just don't understand the mental, emotional, psychological. Yeah. I mean, it's just the best college football player can wilt in the NFL because of things having nothing to do with what happens on the field. Nothing to do with the field. It's just the intensity. Anyway, you watch these quarterbacks over the years, Dane, and you understand this is the whole first round quarterback thing. Like the flag either goes up as you're watching them, like, yeah, I can imagine a franchise that needs a quarterback, like their heart starts to beat fast. They're like, think of what our franchise could be with this guy, or they don't make your heart beat fast. Like that's Mac Jones. I'm sorry, that's Mac Jones. What's Mac Jones on your overall board? Like in the 20s, 30s?
Yeah, 25.
Yeah. I mean, look, Mac Jones can unlock and harvest the value of a scheme and like talent in an offense, but he's not going to add anything. He can't add anything to an offensive output. He can just harvest what the offense creates. That's not a player you trade up to number 3 for. That's not a player that makes your heart beat fast when you think about, wow, what could our franchise be with this quarterback? Now I ask you, Lance and Fields, because I would contend that in a draft without Lawrence, and there's a whole other like side discussion on Wilson, but Wilson's 2. In a draft without Wilson or Lawrence, Fields or Lance could go number 1 or number 2. I mean, they're the caliber. I believe they're the caliber of quarterback prospect that go number 1 or number 2 in a draft usually. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this is just a super heavy quarterback class at the top. I mean, we're going to see quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3 for only the 3rd time in NFL draft history. We could see quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3, 4, which has never happened before.
And if it's Jones at 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is at least like
impossible.
There's a scenario,
yeah. And we're gonna a good chance we have 5 quarterbacks go top 10, which has never happened before.
Right.
We could see 7 quarterbacks go in the first 2 rounds, which has never happened before. So this is just a quarterback heavy group at the top, and it's while a lot of people see that as Justin Fields is dropping, it's just more just a really strong group, and it is what it is. So you can poke holes in all these guys. With Fields, we talked about it a little bit. I mean, with Trey Lance, obviously coming from the level that he's coming from, only 17 career starts, all against FCS competition. He's the youngest of these guys, both in terms of experience and then just pure age. It's a fascinating conversation because history tells us that of these 5 quarterbacks, 2 are not going to live up to where they're drafted. And so it adds another wrinkle to this. And something else I think we have to factor in here, which makes it tough, is these teams that we're talking about, the Falcons at 4, the Lions at 7, the Broncos at 9. What's the similarity there? Brand new first year decision makers. Okay. We don't have a track record of how they view certain positions as the head honcho making the calls. We don't have a track record to go based off of. I would even argue with Bill Belichick, we don't really have that track record where is he going to be aggressive to go get a quarterback? Maybe. Has he done it in the past? No, but he hasn't had to. He's had Tom Brady for 20 years. So, he's drafted a quarterback once in the first 2 rounds, and that's Jimmy Garoppolo. But he has not had to use an aggressive mindset to go get that quarterback because he's always had one. So how is he going to, look at this quarterback class? If the right quarterback falls a little bit, is he going to be aggressive and go get his guy? You can't rule it out just because of the fact that this is uncharted waters for Belichick in terms of needing to get that quarterback.
Yeah, you bring up some really great points here, and I think that another layer of intrigue, another layer of excitement of a big reveal on draft night, like you said. Atlanta at number 4, Detroit at number 7. You have these franchises with new regimes, and there's a real world consideration here of if you take a quarterback high in your first draft as a new regime, you're married to that guy. Do you really decide to determine how this job is going to go for you that early, or do you bide your time? And it's, like you said, we'll learn. And one side of the scale is just that's the thing, though. For me, one side of the scale is the evaluation of Fields and Lance. And just saying, like, you don't get a chance to take them. They're usually going to one of the bad franchises, right? Unless you're a bad franchise, you don't expect to be in the top 3 or 4. You just don't. You don't run your franchise expecting, we'll be back in the top 3 or 4 again soon. Like if you're Atlanta. And as it is, Atlanta being number 4 and having a chance to take one of them, like Terry Fontenot has to know that things have lined up for them in a way that it may not happen again the whole time he has this job or any job as a GM. And the same thing goes for Detroit. The same thing goes for Peyton in Denver, understanding the opportunity. And then, like you said, you bring in another point that from the psychology of Bill Belichick, we don't really know because we haven't seen a simulation of this scenario for him. And he's been like humiliated, right? I mean, that's the thing, right? Don't you feel, Dane, like there's a psychological element to Kyle Shanahan trading up saying like, I'm done with Garoppolo. I'm done. Like what, maybe more than your conviction about the quality of the number 3, 4, and 5 quarterbacks of the class. It's like, I know that I don't want my fate to be tied to Garoppolo anymore. Right. And so there's these layers of like a personal side to this, right? And with Belichick, it's like watching Brady win, and basically like everyone's dancing on Belichick's grave. And then there's Chicago. Like, is there somebody that can hit the kill switch on the buzzsaw if Chicago's like, we're going to trade the next 3 first-round picks to trade up for Mac Jones? Because hey, it's a way to get an extension on your job, right? Oh well, how can you judge us in the first year of Mac Jones? That's what happens when you don't fire mediocre people. Is now they have the controls, and they're going to make decisions for job preservation, not necessarily for the good of the franchise. Anyway, go ahead.
That's a great point. Yeah. No. Well, there's so many with each one of those individual decision makers. We could go into Fontenot. Where's he come from? New Orleans, where they had an established quarterback. But what did they do in 2018 draft with Mahomes? They were ready to take Mahomes at pick 11. but the
Right.
Chiefs traded ahead of them at number 10 and took him. So, he was with an organization that had an established quarterback, veteran quarterback, but they were ready to draft a successor. And maybe he's looking at the situation now in Atlanta that he has with Matt Ryan, but you don't pass on a guy that's that good and you have your successor in place. So, does he take that mindset from his time in New Orleans, or does he say, let's roll with the veteran and, we'll figure it out eventually? But New Orleans right now, they're kind of in a situation where their quarterback situation is unsettled. They're not sure what it's going to look like ultimately long term. And then you look at with Denver, and how much is John Elway really hands off? He's still in the building. He still has some type of input. Now that input might just be something very little. It means something little. Peyton's going to do what he wants to do. Hopefully that's the case, and he's allowed to build his team and his vision the way he wants. But he has no ties to Drew Lock. What does he think of Drew Lock? We just don't know that. So there's so many different ways that this could go, and it's really fascinating. And I don't know. To be honest with you, I'm at the point where I can't wait to talk about the fits.
Right.
Like how it's going to play once we know these guys end up and say, okay, well, really like this fit because of X, Y, and Z, and this is going to work, or this surprised us. But let me ask you this, dude. Yeah. Do you think we're going to see a trade in the top 10? Do you think we're going to see a big splash from and let's say it's a team outside the top 10. Do you think we're going to see a team outside the top 10 trade into the top 10 for one of these quarterbacks?
Well, you did bring up a complicating factor when you said that teams might still be making their decision because of the nature of the draft calendar this year. Putting that aside, you would think that if a team had clarity about Fields and Lance, and again, in the same way Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch did, it's okay to make an allowance and say you have done your work on these players enough to know that they're both above the threshold, even if you haven't decided which direction you're going to go. Then as soon as someone trades up to number 3, then that starts the clock knowing that you have to trade up to number 4 if you have that desperation, if you have the adrenaline saying, like, I'm going to do what it takes. And like you said, Atlanta might still be holding out hope that, say, the jump from 9 to 4 for Denver can get them something not quite equal to what San Francisco gave up, but certainly a significant package. Like more than 9 to 4 would cost in a typical year. A lot more, like 3 or 4 times more, And I doubt they would get it, because exactly what would make a team get that done well before the draft and not have someone beat them to the punch. Because we keep talking about multiple teams. So there's no way, like if you've watched Fields and Lance and you're just erect, you're just like, oh man, this guy is the guy, like either one. And I think after watching both of them extensively, I think that is the valid, rational response to Fields and Lance, especially what we can fill in the blanks both off the field too. I mean, there's just nothing like these guys check the boxes for being willing to say we're going down with this ship with this guy, and then at that point, I just think that you would make the deal before the draft. You would not let it go down to when Atlanta's on the clock, because it's that big. It's a 10 or 15 year. It's betting your career, and if it's not done, it's not done. Now, I think it should happen, I mean, during the first round, whatever team ends up with Lance, whatever team ends up with Fields, like I'll stand up and applaud and say, if you root for that team, you should be really excited tonight. You should be really, really excited for what your franchise has ahead. But like you said, we also just want to start talking about the fits. I mean, go ahead.
The other factor that is part of this process is just how different everything is, because we don't have a combine. Teams weren't able to, have these players, set up with a whiteboard and the film and go run through plays, and they could do so virtually.
Yeah.
But they weren't able to go to the pro day the day before and take them out to dinner and get to know us people. The 30 visits, not having those facility visits where you bring them in and have them meet the assistant coaches, the trainers, get a feel for, are they, as people, what we want. So, that missing that part, that human element part is a big deal. And if that without having that part of it, maybe some of these teams aren't comfortable drafting a quarterback, investing all of that, what it's going to take to draft a quarterback that early in a guy that maybe they just don't have a great feel for yet. Or maybe they like one and not the other. And if that's the case, then you have to wait until San Francisco makes the pick at 3 before you make a move. If maybe you really like one, but you're lukewarm on the other, you just, not every team is going to be all in on both guys, I don't think. And so then you have to wait and see who actually goes 3 and who's left for you. And so, regardless, there is going to be a domino effect with what happens at 3 and then what happens at 4. And how that's going to affect the rest of the teams picking top 10 and then beyond the rest of the first round. It's really, really fascinating that, usually every year there's, a situation like this where, we're not sure. Like, last year with Miami and the Chargers, we thought it was going to be Tua and Herbert. We weren't sure which order they were going to go in, but we thought probably quarterbacks there. But we weren't convinced. And, okay, if quarterbacks don't go 5 and 6 in last year's draft, okay, where are they going to fall? Are they going to, that was the scenario last year. This year, I don't think it's a situation where we're going to see these guys fall, but it's more, okay, which teams are going to be aggressive and go get their guy and, answer those quarterback questions. It's really fascinating that, and you've got some teams outside the top 15 with Washington, Chicago. I don't think Pittsburgh would make a move, even though I wish they would. Just
thank you.
But I don't think that's on the table. But yeah, Washington, they need their quarterback of the future. Chicago, they're in quarterback desperation mode. At a certain point, maybe they get that itch. Fascinating. It's going to be so much fun to see it play out next Thursday.
It is. And we're in typical draft fashion, we're going to be simultaneously trying to grasp what we just understood about the direction of the franchise and the future of the pick that was just taken, what that means for the picks coming up in the draft, and what options the team didn't take. So it constantly keeps the mind boggled. And look, even if whatever happens 1, 2, 3, even the decision of Pitts, look, even with the Bengals, like Sewell and Chase, there's no consensus. So even with knowing the quarterbacks are going to go 1, 2, 3, with the Bengals sitting at 5, we don't know. And then that can also get changed if Pitts is there at 5. Then that hasn't. So it's going to be keep us on our toes all night. Now, but you brought up a really good point, and let's talk about 2021 draft as a one-off because of the nature of the calendar. Because, like you said, I know Urban Meyer was talking about this. His first NFL draft, right? He's like something basically like you don't get to wine and dine the players anymore. And he talked about it with free agency, and it's applying to the draft this year too. One of the things I think is interesting because this kind of applied to last year is you saw some organizations last year really eager to say, well, we're fine with there being, not being able to go to the pro days and things like that. We're just going back to how they did it in the 70s, right? Like film, and you bring up some good points. If you're in the room with somebody, if you get to spend time with them, you get a feel for them, and it is a human first. It's a human game first, more than the athlete, or the football strategist. It's a human game first. But I think it'll be interesting to see when we look back at this draft, Dane, how the good versus the bad organizations either benefited or were hurt by having to go through. I feel like NFL organizations are superstitious, right? They're very persnickety about everything being just so. They don't like uncertainty. They don't like any kind of uncertainty. And this draft, even players opting out, right, has injected uncertainty. I think the bad organizations generally will probably make the wrong decision about, imagine if you had a player that checked all the boxes, but he just didn't play last year. Yeah. Should that change your opinion? I think the good organizations will know what to do at that fork in the road, and the bad organizations will pick the bad road, the bad fork on these choices. What do you think about how teams are going to handle players who didn't play in 2020?
Yeah, it's obviously uncharted waters. We've never really had this before. It's funny. It seems like yesterday we were talking about guys opting out of bowl games and how big of a deal that was. Right. Now we've got opting out of seasons, and we'll have to see. I think it's a case by case basis. I think Penei Sewell, Jamar Chase, guys like that, they didn't need to play in it.
Doesn't matter
for us. For us to know what they are. And some guy, Caleb Farley, he cited, losing his mom to cancer and how the thought of losing another family member to COVID and just, that he was one of the first to opt out, and he was very matter of fact in his reasoning. And, what are you going to do except just respect that? Rashawn Slater, He opted out when the Big Ten canceled their season and said, well, okay, I guess I might as well start preparing for the draft. And then by the time the Big Ten said, all right, well, let's change our mind, we're going to play this season, it was a little bit too late for him. He was already in workout mode. And so I think it's going to be different for every single player, how the team views them. A guy like Gregory Rousseau, he's a guy who needed that extra year of development just to see, okay, you look great, redshirt freshman, but okay, what steps are you taking? I think the biggest question for teams is finding out, all right, what have you been doing this last year to get better on the field? Now, I'm sure you've been working out. I'm sure you've been lifting weights. But in terms of being a better football player, tell me what you've been doing. And those are the questions that these opt-outs better, at this point, they've answered those questions. But, they better have been ready for those questions. What have you been studying? How have you tried, who have you been working with to improve your game? And some guys, it actually might have helped them. You look at a Quinn Miners, who didn't have a 2020 season. Division III did not play. He spent his season instead working out with Duke Manyweather, with several other trainers, getting his body right, getting his technique right. He goes to the Senior Bowl, and 3 days of practice, he went from a 6th or 7th round pick to now I don't think he gets out of the top 60. Just based off of those 3 games and a full year of him, working on his development. So there's so many different cases of how opt-outs have affected each one of these guys. And I think that's how teams are attacking it. It's a case-by-case basis. It's not, a blanket over all of them. Now, it could be a case for some teams where they say, okay, we've got Joe Tryon from Washington and, Jason Owe ranked or graded almost identical and, late first round. We're going to go with Jason Owe, even though he didn't have a sack this year. But we still saw it. We still have film of him. We still have tape of him. We know what he's been doing. And that could be the case. I think that's just a hypothetical. But I could see a scenario where a lot of teams look at it that way, where if it's a coin flip between 2 players, they go with the guy that they saw most recently this past season, as opposed to the guy that they just haven't seen in over a year.
Yeah, I think that the biggest takeaway, which you pointed out first, is if you're a top 10 type talent, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And I'm curious if a player coming out of his true sophomore year who's being told you are in the top 10 right now says, I'm not playing. If the NFL doesn't change their eligibility rules, I don't care.
I hope not. Just selfishly, I hope not. But yeah, to your point, the guys that are that highly thought of, it's I can understand why that's going to maybe become part of the thought process. But all these guys like Thibodeau from Oregon, who looks like a top 10 pass rusher in the 2022 class. He's looked really, really good his first 2 years, but he's still areas that he can get better and develop. So selfishly, I hope that's not the case, but I can understand why some teams or some players might even consider it.
Yeah, business decision. Things are changing. We've been talking draft for over a decade, Dane, on the circuit. Things continue to change. Okay, no combine, but teams have the data from the sensors anyway, true mile per hour acceleration and things like that. It changes, it continues to change. I want to ask you just on more your opinion, because like I said, I think teams are superstitious. Like they get used to doing it a certain way. They get used to having certain data. They get used to certain rituals leading up to the draft, and then they don't have them. It creates uncertainty. And how do you react to that uncertainty? What part of draft evaluation or the draft process do you think is the most overrated by NFL teams?
The most overrated. I think that certain aspects of the combine certainly are overrated. Teams share that. I mean, the teams have done multiple studies on what correlates, what helps, determine future success. And I've seen some of those studies. Teams have shared that with me. And, most of those look at bench press and say it means absolutely nothing. Bench press means nothing. Throw it out. It does not matter. Basically, it tells us who spends time in the weight room and who doesn't. That's all it tells us. It doesn't really match on-field strength. And that's not necessarily me saying that, even though I kind of agree. But that's what these studies and NFL teams have done. That's what it tells them. Meanwhile, the 3-cone that usually correlates. If you're under 7 seconds in the 3-cone, that's something that usually tells you it's a good gauge of athleticism, that short area quickness and that burst. So that's kind of the opposite. But yeah, to your point, we're getting to while I agree with you when you say that they're kind of set in their ways and how they do things, and it's just a routine. the flip side of that, I do think that there are several organizations, multiple organizations that are always looking for that edge. Okay, okay, we do this, this, and this. Let's do one thing better than everybody else. Let's get that edge. What's that going to be? And we're getting using GPS data for on the field. That's coming. That's going to be part of the normal NFL draft lexicon of how we use things. Will it replace 40-yard dashes altogether? Eventually, it will. But it's something that will start to become more and more accepted, depending on where the source is, and just having that previous data to, because that's really one of the most helpful things is when you have a player test and you have all of his data in front of you. You can compare it to, okay, well, who ran this fast but also had a low vertical? Is there any examples of that in the NFL now? Like that helps us visualize, oh, no one's ever done it. No one's ever ran a 4.5 but had a sub 32-inch vert. Like, oh, okay, or no one's been or no receiver has had 1,000-yard receiving season, but also had that testing data. Okay, I mean, that's not irrelevant, like that's something that helps tell us about a player. And it's the same thing with all these new metrics that are going to be introduced over the next coming years. It's all about finding an edge, but it's also about having the past data to compare to, just to give us a frame of reference and a perspective that helps us tell where these players are headed. So, metrics and analytics, it's something that all teams use to a different extent, and it's not going to slow down. We're always looking for an edge, always looking for something new to introduce, and it's going to keep us all on our toes to keep up with it all.
Yeah, like you said, it's not going to slow down. Like anywhere billions of dollars are at stake, it's never going to slow down, right? Exactly. And the data is going from like SD to HD in terms of the level of granularity and the way that different things can be teased apart. And like you said, everybody wants an edge. And I think you are going to see teams start to understand more how to use filters on this data. And teams have always kind of done this. I remember when I first started knocking around the draft scene, you just learned a lot about thresholds, a lot about how teams, and different teams had different thresholds. But there's this idea of a threshold, like a knockout factor that says, whatever, this arm length on a tackle, you move him to guard or something. But I think teams are getting a lot more subtle about what they're looking for, even down to, I think the good organizations probably understand, like for this role, not just a position, but for this role in the offense, these are the kind of metrics that we're looking for, that this kind of athlete can unlock the value of this role, or is more comfortable in this role than this other kind of athlete. So it is going to be fascinating. A little more leaks out. I kind of feel like, Dane, it's like, top secret government contractor, defense contractor stuff. Like we learn about it like 2 or 3 years after they're doing it, like it's all, there's a lag,
Devontae Smith's going to be a fascinating test case this year. A 6-foot receiver who's 170 pounds. And it's not one of these cases where, just get him in an NFL camp and he'll get up to 180. No, he's a 170-pound receiver. That's just who he is. And you look at, I've talked to some teams who have flat out told me, like, we're not going to bet on the outlier in the first round. That's just not what we do. If he is the outlier, there's not a lot of guys you can point to that are 6 foot, 170 pounds at receiver and productive. Other teams are willing to think outside the box a little bit and say, hey, we'll take a chance on a guy who started double-digit games each of the last 3 years, who, you talk to people at Alabama, you watch the film, he's more competitive and tougher than a lot of 225-pound wide receivers. So there's just, different schools of thought on how different teams view the thresholds, view, certain things that they look for at each position. And then you got an outlier like a Devontae Smith, where I don't know how you can watch his film and not love him, but, really just point back to, he's 170 pounds. And that's going to be a problem for some teams. But should it be? And that's I don't know that part is necessarily going to go away. That's always going to be something that teams are going to have differing views on, and we're going to talk about it in the media and what's right, what's wrong, and then eventually we'll find out if Devontae Smith ends up making some teams regret that they passed on him.
And there's a lot of layers here, because I think one is that, like you said, the data is always backwards looking. right? Which leaves out the part of the picture where the game is changing. Like what was true about the game 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago just might not be true now as it relates to these thresholds and things like that. But like you said, you're looking at these filters, and there are players with Devontae Smith's BMI at wide receiver, like Marvin Harrison, right? Marvin Harrison. Well, but that's instructive because you say, how did Marvin Harrison win in the pros? Does Devontae Smith win that way? Well, then it's not an exception. Actually, he fits a type. He fits a type that we already know. He's not an outlier. This is how you use these sets, but you don't use these sets to make a definitive answer. But as you're talking about in the big picture, it's this system that you hope, and really it does, rewards just the more valid, sound thinking and punishes the more narrow-minded thinking. Because as we've talked about multiple times during the show already, Dane, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. Like you said, case by case on players that opt out. You have to be subtle. We have to have nuance. You have to perceive this case for its nature and not just automatically be overlaying some other experience or some other thing. Like this is a challenge in life, right? It's on the couch, right? Like we all kind of, as we go through our life, like if we're acting out of fear or acting out of some places more like the shadows or darkness, like maybe we make our emotions skews our decisions poorly, and if we think clearly, then we make good decisions. And this is what's fun about the draft. This is what's fun about seeing what all of these teams and human beings do. So flip side, what do you believe, Dane, is the most underrated part? Like if you were if you were GM, you would say, like, look, in our scouting department, we're going to make sure that we correctly weight this thing that I think some teams at least don't care enough about.
I don't know if it's like one specific metric or one specific drill or anything like that. I just think, you cannot understate how important it is, those facility visits. I mean, to me, that is what we're really missing this year, that teams are really missing, and really helps us figure these guys out. Like these players would go on these facility visits, and as they're leaving, teams are crossing their name off the draft board.
Yeah.
Say right. It was an okay visit, but he's just not what we're looking for.
Right.
And, I think, because you're drafting not just the player, you're drafting the people and how they're going to impact your community, how they're going to fit in the culture of what you're building. It's just, there's so many different, variables here with each different prospect on and off the field. I mean, it's an investment in these guys, and getting to know your investment before you go all in is so important. And so, it comes down to getting to know the people, and there's different ways to do that. And it's not just a feel, because, let's be honest, like a lot of smart people have been fooled by, guys that have done well in a meeting, done well in an interview, done well in a visit, but turned out to be maybe a bad dude, or, he put on an act, something like that. So, just trying to figure out these guys as people, are they genuine? Is it forced? Is it unforced? That is the ever long struggle with the NFL draft process. And it makes it really tough for those of us on the outside, because we're going based off of what we hear, not what we know. We don't get a chance to spend hours upon hours with these guys to get to know them as people. A lot of these guys, I talk to their high school coaches, I talk to their college coaches, I talk to people that know them, teammates, just to get a better sense. But even then, I feel like I'm still, just getting an outside view of who they are, not an intimate view. And so for NFL teams, it's trying to figure out the best way to get to know these guys. That's more than just a Wonderlic test. That's more than just a personality test. And asking the right questions in an interview setting. I think it's one reason why teams like the combine, because even though it's fitting a lot into a short span, it tests these guys because it's adverse conditions. They're not on their home turf. They're in a very competitive environment where they're one of 330 guys vying for specific jobs, and it's supposed to be uncomfortable. It's supposed to put them out of their comfort zone. And, it helps reveal things. And so I think that's one area of the combine that we don't talk about enough as being valuable. So my thing with my answer, it all comes back to trying to figure out the best way to get to know these guys as people so you can make the right investment on draft weekend.
That wonderful. Well, I mean, this comes back to what I was saying earlier. It's human. It's a game of humans first. and you're evaluating the human, and not just the human as an athlete or the human as a football player, just the human as a human. And I like, you know, like I often say we're peeking through keyholes. So there's always this idea that we're just guessing because we don't have that. And like you said, even when you talk to coaches, they might have an agenda or a bias, or even a bias they're not aware of. You know, there's always that thing like if a coach badmouths a player, just cross them off, because coaches are always going to be wanting to say good things about their players. You know, always. It's just a question of what level are they willing to go to for this player? And then,
real quick, a great example is last year with Coach Pittman at Georgia, the offensive line coach, who's now the head coach at Arkansas. He said a lot of glowing things about Isaiah Wilson, who ended up being a first-round pick of the Titans, and a young player but really talented. And Pittman said how he couldn't wait to see what he was going to be like in the NFL, and all these glowing. Now maybe he said some more reserved things off the record. We just don't know that part of it, but everything that he said publicly was glowing about him. And obviously we know that Isaiah Wilson experiment has fizzled out pretty quickly. Man. So, and he's the extreme example, but to your point, coaches for the most part, you think they say positive things, and sometimes, like you said, they have their own agendas. Sometimes it's not really at the forefront of their minds. Sometimes it's subconsciously, and it's as an evaluator, as a scout, you have to be part psychologist, you have to be part private detective, and weed through all that to try to find the truth, which is really tough to do.
And it can change. I mean, Isaiah Wilson's going to go down like an all-time first-round bust. Anyway, and I even like the layer you brought up, because you have to have a sensor for, even when you have the facility visit, of when someone's too perfect, like they're too exactly on the nose in like the manner, and you don't actually get to see the real person. You feel like you're getting to see a projection of what they think you want. And it's all like dating. All of this stuff we've been saying, Dane, can apply to dating, right? Sure. All of it. First
impressions and no question.
So let me ask you this, since you opened the door to this. Again, if you're the GM, when you have this time, like, what do you think is the most valuable? Like, if you were in charge of, like, you're going to get an afternoon with someone you're thinking about drafting, like, what would it be something like you do? Because there's the whole angle, like you said, of like throwing them off balance, like the combine. Like, what's being evaluated is like when you're uncomfortable, or is it more personal? Is it more, like, what would you do with that time? How's the best way to use it?
Well, two things. First, I want to know just their intelligence. I want to know, okay, what's their recall like? So different ways you do that. You could talk about, hey, watching film, there was this play 2nd and 3 against Tennessee, and you talking to say we're talking to a corner. Remember what that receiver who was able to get open over top you? What route was that? They just try to get get their memory going and see how quickly, because I think that helps. Who watches film, who pays attention and is really focused so much on their game and getting better, that when they do get beat, they're going to work at it and try to get better. So just their recall, things like that. Or maybe we met with them. Say we had our area scout in there in October, and they talked about certain things. Remember when our area scout was there? What did you guys talk about? And see if he can recall that, things like that. Just memory, and obviously it's a little more important for other positions, some positions as opposed to others. But then I want to know about when you have faced adversity in your life. Give me an example of that. Maybe it could be a family member dying. It could be a time where you lost your starting job. It could be anything. Tell me about that adverse situation, and how did you get through it, and how are you a different person because of it? And because we know that the NFL, it's going to bring some adverse situations. You're going to get humiliated after a mistake on a Sunday. Can you work past that and be able to come back the next play, the next game, and just get there mentally, that mental toughness. So that's a big part of it, is making sure they have that mental toughness to play at a high level on Sundays. And having the intelligence to know the playbook, to understand what the other side is doing when you're studying opponents, and having the tape study and then knowledge to do it. So it centers all around those core beliefs, and there's different techniques and ways to extract that information. But just trying to get to know the player on a personal level, it hopefully brings out some of their true colors.
Yeah, no, it's good, and I like the takeaways there. How do you respond to adversity? And what I read a lot of that is how rigorous is your process? Like are you really committed? Like, have you already absorbed understanding like just how committed you're going to have to be a successful professional football player, or is this going to be something you have to be like woken up to because that's hard to do if it hasn't already set in? Speaking of adversity, as we're like in the last 10 minutes, we go off the rails. Correct me if I'm wrong. Are you a Cleveland Browns fan?
I used to be growing up. I wouldn't say that I'm a fan now because I divorced myself from really fandom of a specific team. And I'm back in Northeast Ohio now. Been here for my wife and I and our 2 kids. We moved back last summer. Get close to family, things like that. So I love this area. I love the people here. I would absolutely love for the fan base to experience more success, even more so than last year. So in that respect, I'm definitely hoping for good things for Cleveland.
So I ask you this then, not on behalf of yourself, but on behalf of the fan base. Should they start to believe? Should they emotionally let themselves become vulnerable and really buy into the idea that this team is not going to be the latest one to let them down in a new and more excruciating way, but instead maybe get it right?
You have to. If you're a fan, you have to. And, you do so knowing there's a chance that they could break your heart. But it's the same thing with any relationship. You're going to get out what you put in. And if you put in, the passion, then it's going to feel that much sweeter when you win a game like that playoff game last year against your Steelers. Sorry.
Oh, no, please. I was rooting for the Browns. I'm sorry, Steelers fans. I was rooting for the Browns at some point during that game. I mean, this is more the psychology of a Steelers fan, but go ahead.
Well, it's something that you look at the coaching staff. You look at the front office. It at least appears there's a plan. You could argue the Browns have a top 10 roster in the NFL, which when's the last time you could say that, or at least make that argument? And they're set up they got 4 picks in the first 3 rounds. They could get better on defense, add some young players. If they're able to hit on a few of these draft picks, they're set up in a good spot. So they've got some big decisions to make coming up here with Nick Chubb going to hit free agency. Do they pay the running back? This front office that's very analytically driven. How do they attack that? That's fascinating to watch. They have some decisions to make on the offensive line and then on defense. And so, it's a team that I think based off of what they did last year and the positive momentum, absolutely. I think that, you allow your passion to take over. And if your heart gets broken, it gets broken. But, you can't be half in, half out. You have to go all in if you're a Browns fan.
Yeah, it's great. There's layers to that. One is, yes, trust this group. But also, that's the only way to be a fan. And they've had a great offseason. Like every move they've made, I love that move. I love John Johnson. I love Troy Hill. Love Anthony Walker. The Clowney McKinley platoon. Love it. Great idea. Yeah. Like it's a excellent way to try to get something more out of these players. And with Chubb, I hope, because they're not in any kind of bad cap spot at all. Like just pay Chubb. Pay him because he's like the tip, the point of the spear of the team. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, when Chubb breaks tackles, when Chubb breaks off those runs, when Chubb puts the lean on the opponent, then you can feel the team feed off of that. I'm sorry to appeal to old school stuff, but I think it works. Keep Chubb and Hunt together for as long as possible. Now, you said you love Northern Ohio, Northeastern Ohio, kind of. And I think I'm from the Pittsburgh area, and we can talk about the Rust Belt, as it goes through, and there's a connection with football. I just spent some time up in Michigan near Detroit, some time in Detroit, and I feel like I'm getting to know that area pretty well. But I haven't really spent a lot of time in the Cleveland area. So what you said, you love this area. What do you love about the area you're from, the area you live?
Well, first and foremost, obviously, growing up here, it's what I knew. There's a nostalgic aspect of it. A lot of family here, so on a personal level, that means a lot. We moved back here. We put down some roots. We built a house. We plan on being here for the long haul. My wife is pregnant with twins. We're gonna have
Good luck.
We're gonna raise our 4 kids here in Northeast Ohio, and don't plan on going anywhere. That's not in the plan. So. I think when just all the different things to do, you want to go. There's plenty of lakes around here. It's a lot of fun in the summer. Cleveland is 45 minutes from me. I'm in Warren, Ohio. We're actually almost kind of right in the middle between Cleveland and Pittsburgh. So I will go to Pittsburgh here and there, which is a great city to visit and hang out in, get some good food, and same thing with Cleveland. A lot of good spots to eat. So it's an area where there's plenty to do, especially in the summer. Winter, it can get cold, and I understand why some people are a little look to avoid that. I get that totally, but no, this is just it's a great area that I'm very fond of. I really loved my 10 years in Texas. It was great, but happy to be back home where I raised my kids, same place I was raised.
Yeah, no, I get it. I think it's I've said this a couple of months ago. I think there's something to love about everywhere, like wherever you're from.
Sure.
There are definitely things to love about it, and it's yours. You should celebrate it, and there's lots of things to celebrate as we get closer to the draft. And every time we get to this time of year, we get to talk to Dane Brugler, The Athletic. It's worth subscribing to The Athletic just to get the draft guide, and keep up with his draft coverage. I know, Dane, you said y'all are going to be doing something during the first round.
Yeah, we'll be live doing a live stream with Robert Mays and Nate Tice, nice. And doing some stuff. So we won't be live until like midway through the first round, and then we'll be on for a good hour and a half or so, taking it all the way through the first round. But I'm looking forward to that. It'll be a lot of fun to talk about, like we talked about before, the fits, and instead of what's going to happen, what did happen, and how the ramifications of how that's going to affect the upcoming season. So yeah, I cannot wait.
Yeah, and see, now I can say, we're going to do we always do the whole first round, Dane. So like you can hang out with us for the first half, and I won't be offended if you go and hang out with Dane and the Athletic guys in the second half. I mean, there's going to be a lot of stuff. It's fun. It's exciting. Again, it releases all the brain juices, adrenaline that gets flowing. And for those of us that really love football and overanalyze it, it gives us enough to chew on to get us to the season, which is why it's the sustenance. It gets us through the desert until the season starts. So we always appreciate Dane's work. DP Brugler, Brugler on Twitter if you aren't already following him. The Athletic. I think tomorrow I'm going to get Eric Galco on here. So it's leading up to the draft, bringing in the heavy hitters. You all deserve it. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun that we've all been kicking around this little sandbox for a while now, and we get to ruminate and reflect. And we do it always for you out there, folks. You are the very best always. You are the very classiest. Thank you for being part of what we do. Check out what we're doing at Football Guys, as always, and stay classy.